Some new information on a kidnapping case we've been following on happening now. 26-year-old Enrique Arochi's trial starts this week. He is accused in connection with the disappearance of Christina Morris. On August 30th, 2 years ago, she and Arochi and some friends got together to party. They'd all been high schoolers together. Arochi and Morris last seen together at 3:55 a.m. They were walking into a parking garage. Now, 3 minutes later, Arochi's car is seen leaving that same garage. Christina is not seen. Later that morning, surveillance video captures Arochi cleaning his car. He arrives late to work. On September 2nd of 2014, Christina's father reports her missing. Arochi is interviewed by police in the days following her disappearance. They conduct searches inside his home and car. On December 9th, forensic reports reveal Christina's DNA found inside Arochi's trunk. The amount of DNA significant enough to likely be from blood or saliva. 4 days later, on December 13th, Plano police arrest Arochi, charging him with aggravated kidnapping. Arochi is pleading not guilty. In fact, back in 2014, this is what Arochi had to say about the search warrant affidavit that points out he made false statements to police.
I just want to say that I'm innocent. I didn't do anything to Christina Morris. I didn't even remember that I let her borrow my phone to call her boyfriend. And the detectives told me that I did, and I showed them. They were like, well, can we see your phone? And I showed them my phone.
So here's our legal panel. Brian Claypool is a criminal defense attorney. Emily Campagno, a former federal attorney and former criminal defense attorney. Brian, it sounds like an open and shut case. I mean, they've got the two of them walking into a parking garage. He drives out. Her DNA is in his trunk, and she has not been seen in the last 2 years. As a defense attorney, how do you approach that?
John, thinking that somebody is guilty and proving they are guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a courtroom are two vastly different concepts. When I first looked at this, my visceral reaction was like yours. Wow, this guy looks like he's guilty. But here are several hurdles that the prosecution is going to have that I would argue on behalf of Arochi. First and foremost is this doctrine of transference of DNA. If you remember, John, a few weeks back I was on your show regarding that tragic murder of Juliana Redding in Santa Monica. We thought that the killer in that case was going to be convicted. She wasn't because of this transference of DNA. That means that the DNA of Christina, just because it's on the trunk of his car, that could have been transferred by the investigator because he investigated and he looked at the trunk of the car of her ex-boyfriend before he went to this trunk of the car. So you've got a problem with that. The second issue is motive. If Arochi was spurned by her earlier in the evening, why are they walking together into the parking lot? The third problem is we don't have, I hope she's still alive, but if she isn't alive, we don't have her body. We can't do a DNA test, for example, under her fingernails to see if his DNA is under her fingernails and there was a bite mark, and we can't take her teeth to try to match that bite mark on Arochi. Those are the problems.
But there was also evidence, Emily, that shortly after Arochi was seen wiping down his car and using a squeegee in the area of the trunk, that he had injuries on his arms and hands, scratches on his face, that kind of thing. Doesn't that say to a jury, you know, hey, this guy stuffed this poor woman in a trunk?
That's what the prosecution will want them to believe, absolutely. And that's going to be their theory of a case. They're going to paint this whole portrait of all the circumstantial evidence that we see, but trying to tailor it down to a triangle of evidence in their eyes that they see as the slam dunk aspect. So they're going to say, look, clearly he was the last person to see this victim. Her DNA is on the trunk, and look at the cell phone tower pings. And then in addition to that, he was seen cleaning his car the next morning, had injuries and bite marks, said to his boss, my ribs hurt. He had stolen a phone from his work earlier and only then tried to wipe it clean, tried to deny that he had. So there's a whole host of additional facts here, in addition to him being spurred at the party earlier, that can help round out the case.
She had a boyfriend at the time. Apparently they were fighting that night, and he, police say, was a drug dealer. Does that throw some doubt into the minds of the jury, Brian, as to whether or not Arochi is really the one responsible for her disappearance?
That's a great point. Yeah. That's a great point, John. That's the fourth hurdle that I didn't mention for the prosecution. She is actually texting her ex-boyfriend within minutes of meeting Arochi in the parking structure. I believe he's a convicted felon, and they had a falling out. So that's why the police investigated him as well, so the prosecution can make an argument there are at least one, maybe two other potential assailants.
But I guess, Emily, you know, if I'm a jury member and I think that, you know, this woman appears to be walking willingly with this guy into the parking garage, 3 minutes later, she is supposedly in his trunk as he wheels out the door. I mean, how do you go from this kind of a, you know, friendly walk together to her being stuffed in a trunk and disappearing, hasn't been found since? Go ahead, Emily. All right, it appears we have lost
hey, John,
our signal
John?
to Emily. Go ahead, Brian, see if you can answer that question.
Yeah, John. Yeah, well, real quick, one other point I wanted to make was just to make the point clear on the DNA evidence. Remember in the Juliana Redding case, that the suspect in that case had DNA on the doorknob entering Juliana's apartment, and they had DNA on a knife in the kitchen in that case as well, and she was acquitted because of this developing doctrine called transference of DNA. And I will tell you, in this case, the defense lawyer is already making that argument. So I would watch this case very closely,
Brian,
and you know,
yeah.
we might see another surprise.
Brian Claypool and Emily Campagno, whom we lost. Thanks very much. Back with more in just a moment.
You bet. Thanks, John.